the problem is how they're socializing these changes, and they're very top down, and there's not producer input. And so these things just get sprung on people, and then people react negatively. And so that's part of the problem, is especially like that finally, this one affects people who are on the other side of the pond, the Q graders and their way of life. So you hear they're complaining, but you rarely hear when a farmer is going to be upset about something because, um, they're just not involved. They're busy farming. Um, and so all of these things are top down, and they don't consider, they don't socialize and ask farmers what they think. And so that's part of the problem. And then and what I would say is what farmers want more than anything else is predictability. And when you just spring new rules on people and then people have to hustle to figure out what's going on, it gives them insecurity. And you do that in a time when there are tariffs and other unpredictabilities like the sea market, and now you just throw another unpredictability on top of all of that. You're not helping farmers by doing things, by creating change. And I think change is good, but you got to remember that people fear change. And if you don't bring it in a gradual way with input, this is the result you're going to get. And that's why I don't like fair trade and I don't like organic, because those are all top down rules. None of those rules are created and developed in these countries where we grow coffee. The same with the rules for deforestation, and now the same with the rules for cupping. None of There are very excellent cuppers in almost every origin country, and there's no input from any of those people, I don't think. And so, of course, this is an opinion based on not being tuned out. I just tune it out and keep my head down. And right now, I'm watering my garden. So
And we can hear the animals. Thanks, Lowell. I think that, I never thought I would be in this position. I'll let you chime in, Paolo. I just wanted to say that I never thought I would be in this position of kind of defending the SCA, but I do feel like I want to say that these changes do feel sudden, but just because they feel sudden to us doesn't mean they are sudden. It's been 4 years that they've been talking about this. It's been 2 years since they even started putting videos and communications out there that this was coming. So I think that, yes, they finally announced it in April and like really put deadlines around it, but this has been in the works for many years. And so I think that it's more, a lot of us haven't been paying attention and it feels really sudden, but I do think that the SCA did do a fairly decent job of going very slowly and taking several years to roll this out. And at some point, it had to be the final deadline. I think the other thing I do want to mention is that my understanding in speaking to somebody who was really involved, he worked at the SCA for 10 years, was that it was like 1,600 people, including many producers, were included in these multi-year conversations of their feedback of developing these new forms. And I think that this idea of change is very relevant. I think Lowell's right. Like any kind of change is a disruption. But I do think that looking into the types of forms, the it's like this, the form that we had was really complicated. So I think the impression is, well, that piece of equipment is already difficult and now they put out three, so the complexity is 3 times 3. Now we have something that's so much more that I have to learn, that I have to do. Except that what they've done and what I've been really impressed by is that the forms are so intuitive and so easy to understand. It's like the first one was so hard. We think that they did something that's more complex, but it's actually much easier to understand. And so I think that, yes, it's change and it's disruption, but I think that this is something that any person, I don't think you need a training for this. I think that they're trying to make something like, again, the hedonic scale is like, do you like it? And one of the things that I've seen that is so, what's the word? That has surprised me is looking at it and saying, okay, it's a 9-point scale. How do I know what a 9 is? Because Paolo's going to help us by showing us, he's going to show us the old form that had numbers.
Yes,
And can you hold up
there
the
are
form real
some
quick,
change.
Paolo? Sorry, because you have it.
This is the old.
Yeah. So that's the old
This
form.
is the old.
It's a
Okay.
very
What is the
intimidating.
old?
It has a lot of
No.
things on it.
This is the new.
Yes.
This the number 4 is the famous extrinsic. It is not the final. Is is not definitive to this one,
Yeah,
no,
and
because they
it still
change a
says
lot of
on the title it says beta, as in like this is still in testing.
beta.
Beta,
Yes,
like they're
it's correct.
working
Beta.
on it.
This
It
this
says
is called beta.
yeah.
This is beta also. So you have because if I give you 86, I make these examples always with my friend, crazy. And I say 86. You have a Brazilian coffee with mechanical. They put pesticide with the air plant. We make a good selection and we give 86. I have another coffee. Ethiopian is a small family living near the forest. They go, they pick the coffee. They are heirloom from the past, I don't know. And I give you 86, 85. The same number, but it is not correct to give the same number to a airplane pesticide, a handmade heirloom from the family of ancestors. This is my so this gives the difference. You have to make the difference between the two coffee. You you say to the buyer for to me, Paul, attention, they are very different from this coffee, like wine. You are in the wine. There is a great difference between a big industry and a small producer. It's correct.
Yeah. Paulo, I want to say that I think this is the most interesting part, going back to what we were talking about with Dylan, where this extrinsic part is this is how people do buy coffee. Like, this is how we're already kind of valuing coffees in our mind. And we've just kind
No,
of
for me, no.
taken out, well, some
For,
people do. So I'm thinking, right. So the way you buy
this
coffee
is the
is,
most important.
it's the most important,
Affective.
but people
Yes.
do think about extrinsic qualities. There just hasn't really been a place for it. So I think what the SCA has done is that instead of having one form that was a lot of things mixed up together, they looked at how people actually make decisions and buy coffee or make decisions on buying coffee, and they've formalized it. But like, this stuff was happening anyway. People were giving an extra point to a coffee of, some extrinsic attribute that they liked, but there wasn't a clear way to communicate that. So now I don't think that the extrinsic is something, I think the way, and this isn't fair because Fridolin isn't here to like have his, to rebuke me in this point, but what I think he was bringing up in the last time that we talked is that I already have to do so many things, and now I have to come up with more extrinsic things. Like, I'm already kind of having trouble getting my coffee to be a good quality, and now I have to come up with these other things. And I don't think that's the right way to look at it, and I don't think that's the intention. I don't think it's like now you need to do more as a producer to make your coffee interesting. I think it's mining the things that are already there. So in his situation, he was revamping a cattle ranch, and the fact that there was all of this arid land that was in a certain level of biodiversity and a certain level of use, and he is revamping that, turning this cattle ranch into a biodiverse coffee farm. That has a lot of extrinsic value. There could be a lot of people that want to support that project in and of itself. He doesn't have to go out and search extrinsic things that make his coffee interesting. His coffee already is interesting. It's just formalizing and saying, hey, is there a buyer who is interested in supporting increasing the biodiversity of coffee? And I have a pretty good coffee. So that's where I think that those extrinsic qualities are already coming into our decision making. There just wasn't a way to like formalize it. But also, I don't think that SCI is saying you have to have these things. I don't think it's leaving producers out. I think it's calling more producers in. I'm really surprised at how well these forms have been thought up. And you don't have to use all three of them. You
But
can
this
use
is
one or none of
but
them.
but this change in this start in the 23, and now it's changed completely because you have when you take a look at that certification,
Mm-hmm.
there are only 5 certification in this. The first was very they have more certification. Now you have only farming, country, region, name, producer, variety, harvest date, and so on. The size, the process.
But that's
Because
the thing, Paulo. It
when
doesn't. If they have, yes, I see the certifications: 4C, Fair Trade, Organic, Rainforest Alliance, and then other. So the point isn't you
for
must have
C, fair
these,
trade, C, organic, rainforest, and other.
right?
Basta.
But this isn't like that's a thing where the first form got us confused, where we were mixing two things. We were mixing what the thing is and then putting a value to it. So this form isn't saying if you have fair trade and organic, it's plus 2 points. And if you have a really interesting region, it's plus 2 points. And if you have this, it's minus points. This is just a form to say, hey, think about these things. This isn't, you're not qualifying, you're not giving a score, which is what's amazing about all of these forms. You're not giving a score. You're just saying this is what it is, and then someone else is determining that value. So you can have none of these certifications. You can have none of these, processing things. It's just something to think about. Hey, coffee is more than a score. Like the biggest problem with these forms is that we reduced coffee to a number. This is an 82. This is an 87. Like the problem was we started tying coffees to numbers,
It's the,
and now
the same.
there's no
It's
numbers.
the same because, no, when you make the affective, no, you have a calculator, no, that give the score. Why? Because they don't want to reverse uh, judges.
I
You,
think that
what's
the
happening
SCA
with
did
the
that because they thought people would freak out. So it's like a baby
eh,
steps.
eh, with this, in fact, when you have to examine a coffee, the first three, sorry that I show this, you have not to know the origin of coffee. You have to assess the coffee without knowing nothing. This is important because what's happening with this? I have a Kenya, I have a Panama, for example, a Panama. I have a Panama, we test a Panama, but the Panama was so, and we say, hey, but it's a Panama. We give 8 is a Panama. Body, Panama, 8. And so on. We arrive at 86, 87, and so on. This is not correct. In fact, this is impossible to make this. You want to arrive to 87. It's impossible because without a calculator, you cannot use this.
Well, no,
But
no,
the
no. It's
calculator
not.
use
No. It's not that you can't use it without the calculator. It's like the SCA
it's
wants you to
impossible.
stop putting numbers to it, but they knew that
Yes,
people are
yes.
so tied to their numbers. They're like, okay, fine, we'll get you a calculator, and you can use the calculator, but hopefully you learn to not use a calculator, and don't put a score.
It's impossible. This is impossible because you don't have a 10 number. You have nine. And we tried last year. If you put 5 in all the here all, you have 79.5.
Right, and they did that
If
on
you
purpose,
give
so you wouldn't use the number. Like they want you to not have that final number.
no, but I explain. If you get
Okay.
the number 5 is the meaning of number 5 is not good, not
Neutral.
so and so. Neutral.
Yeah.
This is neutral. And you gave not 80 is rather below 80.
Yeah.
But the problem, sorry that I talk a lot today because I'm much involved in this because I because here I thinking about
Yeah.
this form. We and my friend every Saturday, crazy man, Italian, we make a cupping online.
Yeah.
We are 3, 4 person. We make we go around for 2 years making coffee with the roasted coffee. No, we buy the coffee. The problem was there was a great problem. The problem was anaerobic experimental. When we test the acetic Frinsa, and so we say, hey, hey, what would you do with acetic Frinsa? Is out. is a defect. Is a defect. And so the coffee out through the window. No, but there is a market for Frinsa. If you don't know what is Frinsa, it's a Indonesian anaerobic with acetic cacao nibs, terrible. Now it's finished for us. So, but there is a market for this coffee. We taste a coffee last day. It was the same maturation, rotten fruit, olive, course. But they have a market, and the market is in the purpose. I want a crazy coffee for a crazy Italian coffee lover. And so I search for this ascetic and so on. And I give a good what's this, assessment. This is my explanation. So this doesn't work for with the new coffee. It doesn't work.
It doesn't
If you
work,
taste the
correct.
lowest bean, the last year was on the championship was lowest bean, Las Flores, Hernandez, only this Colombia, but they are out of this.
Mm-hmm.
They're out. They are too fermented, too crazy. It's out. With this, they go to the championship with this.
Yeah.
For me, the key is not in the number 4, but in the number 3.
Yep.
The solution and exactly in the purpose. What you are searching for.
Yeah,
Sorry
Paolo.
that I stopped talking.
And
Stop.
I realize now how much we agree, because and that's why it's been really confusing to me to have producers be against these forms, because just like you're saying, when you're thinking about a purpose, there's so many more coffees that get to participate. So what Paolo was talking about was the Lojas beans that do a lot of innovative processing, and they have created flavor profiles. They've created flavors that are outside of the traditional form that he's been holding up, and therefore those coffees don't qualify. They may be getting bad scores even though they're great coffees and they have a home. And that's the whole point, is that there are people that value that. There are people that are interested in that, and using our old form, a lot of those coffees would immediately get disqualified because they would be, getting below specialty, because we've calibrated to some standard of what is good coffee and what is bad coffee, and that mostly, I think, is exclusive. And these new forms allow more people to prove that their coffee is more than a number, and their coffee has value in a lot of different ways. So I think that it's, yeah. I wanted to, Jason, I saw that you were trying to type something. So I wanted to see if maybe you can't turn your camera on for some reason, but if there was anyone else that had something to say that would like to be part of this conversation, either just giving us oh, there you are. You're on.
Yeah, I was just busy typing and I can just talk about it. So from what I see, and of course I wasn't at Expo this year, but I've been looking into this. From what I understand, and you can correct me, this is a system devised where um, the person thinks about the purpose of the coffees that they're tasting, why they need it, and then part of the grading, and this is person by person or company by company. And this is, and also in that, I'm looking at this as a roaster. So this is what we're thinking about when we're looking at roasting coffees for our customers or our own cafes. So we're going to grade a coffee and think about what are our values, what's this coffee used for, and this is something that we're getting better at. We're thinking about, and actually, what we call the coffee price crisis has really helped us think about it. I mean, we got to the point to where it's like we need to really think about what our values are and change how we purchase coffee. We want to do better on our part. And so now we're defining what our values are. So we're thinking about certifications. We're thinking about how the coffee's grown, who are these producers? And so what I like about it does keep that in mind. You write that down. You put these things about these coffees, and that helps us grade like by taste, by the story that I like to say behind the coffee. And all these things come into mind and we say, okay, this coffee here is meeting all these things, is doing these things. So it's a tool to help us think about those more rather than just how does this coffee taste? Is
Yeah,
that correct?
yeah, correct. And I wanted to give an example, a little bit of what Paulo was talking about. So, because this purpose, what is the point of this coffee? Let's imagine you're just tasting a random coffee with the old form, and maybe it's not as expressive. It's just a medium body, medium acidity, and you would maybe score it an 82, 83. Well, you've already put a price on that 82, 83. Let's say the coffee is $7 a pound and you're like, I'm not going to pay $7 a pound for an 82 coffee. That's outside of my, maybe my budget. But if instead the coffee that you need was going to be like Paolo was saying, maybe part of an espresso blend. Maybe it just needs to have the body and you're looking for something else and you really need this coffee for this particular purpose and it's not an 82. At that point, you're just like, this coffee fits exactly what I'm looking for. Maybe for you, that coffee is actually like a 90 because it fits the exact profile that you're looking for. And now when a producer says, this is my cost of production, this is what I need to survive, my coffee costs $7 a pound, you're not tying it to an 82 and you're like, why would I ever pay that? You're like, this coffee fits the purpose that I'm looking for. I'm going to pay what is asked because that's the coffee that I need for my purpose. So that's where I'm saying like it allows like decoupling and divorcing this number actually allows more producers to ask for what the coffee's worth and show that there's value in other things. This coffee may not be the most expressive single origin that you're going to like put on your bar and charge $12 a cup for, but maybe that's not what you need. And something else is equally valuable because it fits that, that niche. And I think that the SCA, I think if there's only a single criticism I can give on this, because overall I'm very on board with what they're doing. My criticism is that they even included the calculator because I know people wanted it because they're just like, but I need a number. And they're like, okay, here's your calculator if you want. And they made it purposely a little bit cumbersome. So I think that getting away from the number just helps producers. It just helps producers a lot. I find it hard to see how that hurts. But maybe Lowell will tell us.
Yeah. I'll let Lil talk.
Lowell and then Jason and then
Just
Dylan.
a question. When Dylan mentions the extrinsic value of the coffee, and then Jason says he's looking for, they want to have better buying practices, which I think starts with extrinsic. So that's my question. When these coffees become available for a roaster, it seems logical that if you start with the extrinsic value of that coffee before you taste it, that's going to be helpful to the producers in the sense that they're not trying to sell to people that don't fit their way of producing coffee. So if you're looking for some wild processed coffee versus an environmentally friendly coffee, you're going to start with those extrinsic values and just cup those coffees that meet that particular. And so to me, that seems like a positive, because if I send samples to somebody and they're not interested in our social work, they're looking for a 92, anaerobic ferment, and that's not us. So it doesn't matter what it tastes like. You got to start with the extrinsic. So is that where they're starting? I guess that's my question. Is you
Yeah,
start with the extrinsic
it's like a
before
filter.
so it's not a blind cupping.
I
It's
think
not a
it's
blind cupping.
exactly. I think it's a really positive filter for producers where you can target those people and say, here's our mission. Our mission is, sustainability, environmentally friendly coffees, and we're looking for those people. So we're offering those coffees. If that's important mission for you, these are the coffees that we have. And I think that it could be a really good filter to, like you say, Lowell, maybe not waste your time sending your coffees to the wrong people. And again, I don't think extrinsic has to be included. I just think now it can be. Now we have like a formalized way to talk about coffee that we can recognize. But it's not like a duty. Now producers have to do an extra thing. It's just like, do you already have a mission? And now you can find those coffees. I'll let Jason jump in, and then I know Dylan had a comment.
Yeah, so what I think about grading by a number, in the past, we were working with an importer who was working directly with Guatemalan coffees in Yepocapo. And and he had coffees that weren't that great when we graded them, but we knew the work that he was trying to do. We also gave him feedback on what we thought the coffee tasted like and what we felt may have happened on the farm. We didn't know. We were asking questions so he could go back and talk with them. And because of that, and we took a chance and just bought a bunch of coffee that we decided would work well in a blend. It was definitely not single origin on its own, but it did work well in a blend. So we found a purpose for it. He was actually able to go back and because unfortunately, his company's still going, it's just different. But he worked in this price that we would pay to give back to the farms. So they are actually able to improve on infrastructure because of like how he was working his system and what he would get paid and what he was doing with them. And so because of that, they are actually able to do different things for the next year. And it was night and day what the coffee was like. And so if we stuck to the numbers and say, well, this number is not any good, just throw it out, that would never would have happened. So that's, I think this here will help guide those and help make better decisions.
Exactly, and that producer in Yopokapa may, if we're still stuck on this numbers, and he's only thinking, I need to up my score, I need to up my score, and he doesn't know how or doesn't have the resources, could get really discouraged and say, I'm not able to participate or just be really limited. But if instead he can know, hey, there's value, there's people that want to support communities like ours, I'm going to reinvest in the community, I'm going to improve. There's a lot of value in that mission, in that cultural mission, and you can be matched with somebody like Jason who says, hey, I'm interested in supporting community projects, I'm going to be matched with that producer. So I think that what these forums allow is for more people, more producers to say, this is the kind of coffee that I have, who, matching producers to buyers, versus what the SCA forum has focused on is just get that number as high as possible. Right. And that's how, that's the promise. If you get a high number, you will get a good buyer. But that's not how a lot of people can buy coffee. Dylan, I wanted to give you a chance to respond, and then we were going to go to Alejandro because he has a question about drying.
Yeah, I think, in the context of this form, what really needs to be discussed is what is specialty coffee. So, I think one of the key issues is what's the actual definition of specialty coffee, because anyone can create a form to create whatever they want to. Each company can create their own attributes, but the SCA, what is the definition of specialty? And this form or these forms should be pointing at that. And I think that's where I have if all of a sudden coffees become now a lot more influenced by extrinsic, the definition of specialty coffee becomes wider, and then simply becoming Rainforest Alliance, simply doing these other certifications, which obviously cost a lot of money, take a lot of time, all of a sudden are start to begin to outweigh the intrinsic quality, actual in-cup quality. So I think it's a question. A bigger question is, what is the definition of specialty, and how does this form support that definition?
Okay, Nicholas.
I have a thought. Extrinsic already outweighs intrinsic most of the time.
What do you mean?
People are buying based on what they are looking for their personal preferences. That has nothing to do with the intrinsic qualities of coffee. Like, people buy Panama Geisha just to say that they have a Panama Geisha, and they score it higher and they pay more money for it just because of what it's called. And that's the extrinsic version of it. That's already a huge bias on the current forms, because people can't, that's part of the studies, that the white papers that they did with the CVA research, is people's brains can't separate the bias when you're doing analysis. So each of these forms is intended to be used as a completely separate analysis, not together, They should be done as an individual analysis. Like you do the intrinsic, you do the effective, you do the physical as separate passes instead of one overall assessment like we used to do with the original form from 2004. So it already had bias built into it because your brain can't separate these things unless you physically force it to by doing separate assessments.
Yeah, we're not as objective as we think we are. I want to go to Alejandro so that we have enough time to answer his question, which is a drying question, which is also why we're here. So we're going to take a quick detour.
There we go.
Okay.
I don't know, it was giving me trouble to unmute myself. Hello, everyone. I'm sorry to deviate the conversation, but I wanted to share something about my infrastructure about my drying facility. I remember that at FTC we're talking about on the importance on slow drying, right? And to be able to make the coffee to do not increase too rapidly the drying time. But now that I have changed a little bit of my facility where I have increased the capacity for drying, and let me see if I can share you a picture. Then, like my question there is like, how fast is too fast? Because at this moment, I'm kind of preparing myself with the complete flow for my big harvest, which
Yeah.
will be at the end of the September and beginning of October. During this mid-season harvest has been like very low quantities and very low volumes compared to last year because weather condition and raining days, as you might already guys, you have seen this. But I'm kind of having the opportunity to prepare myself, like to kind of evaluate and prepare my drying method and my complete flow of batches in order to be able to my maximum capacity drying. What I'm been thinking is that uh, if I have like a 6-day period of drying, um, would this be too fast, too slow, or what should I really kind of um, determine, or what parameter or what variable could I really focus on? Besides, of course, the cup. But
Yeah.
is there something like I could kind of have my mind set on in order to be able to determine if this is an okay time, or even if I can shore it up, or I don't know if you understand my
I
question.
do.
I
I
hopefully I
completely
can share
understand your
my.
question. So, what Alejandro's talking about is as he's improving his facility, that he's trying to get more volume and more turnover. But then you have this, double-edged sword of the more coffee I can produce, the faster I need to turn it over. And we know that drying is a place where we can really compromise coffee quality. So he doesn't want to dry too quickly, but also the quicker he can dry it, the more coffee he can process, and that is very good for producers. So the question is, how do you know what is too fast? How do you know how slow you need to go? And I think the thing I want to remind you all is that slow and fast are really meaningless, and it's a little bit of a shortcut. It's an easy way to think about it. Oh, too fast drying is bad. I want to slow down. Good. So I think that sharing on the screen right now, you can see. Oh yeah, you can't see that. This is for the video later. But if you look at the chat, Alejandro's able to share pictures of his drying facility. So Alejandro, I don't want you to think about too fast and too slow because that's very meaningless. What I want you to think about is your temperatures. So if your surface temperature or your bean temperatures are within the 35 Celsius range, if you get there fast, let's say 5 days, but you're not reaching that maximum temperature, then you're probably not doing the damage for your coffee. So what I want you to keep track of are your temperatures much more than like time or days or hours. Have a registro, have a place where you're writing down the temperature inside the house, and then also being able to use a what's it called? Like a temperature gun on the surface of the coffee. Because of the facility that we're looking at and you're covered, you're not getting direct sunlight onto the surface of the coffee. So I think that's really positive because it's less likely that the direct sun is going to hit the surface of the coffee and then you're going to heat up too much. But I'm seeing lamina, and so the lamina it can absorb a lot of heat from the sun and radiate that heat back onto the coffee. So you still could get high temperatures. So if you're focusing on keeping your temperatures steady, then however long it takes could be fine. If you can do it in 5 days, but you're not getting above 35 and maybe the air is dry enough where you can dry, I don't think you're going to be doing any damage. I think you could definitely be in some places where, let's say it's slow, your coffee takes 12 days, but if you're getting those high temperatures, you could still be doing damage. So don't think about fast or slow or time, think about temperatures. I'm going to let Dylan and then Lowell chime in.
Yeah, I think also if you can measure the relative humidity in that enclosed room and at the same time, if you have the opportunity to use a moisture meter to correlate, like Lucia says, the temperature, the relative humidity of the room and the moisture content, I think that also help you guide making changes to the facility that improve both the capacity or the speed of process or efficiency of process and the quality.
Absolutely. And I just want to add that the little black kind of dry moisture meter is not the most accurate. It's not everybody's favorite, but if you're taking measurements consistently, if you can get a curve, I think that will outweigh the like inaccuracies of that unit. So it's because you're not just taking one number, you're taking it maybe multiple times a day to see how it's dropping and then from night to the morning. So absolutely, I think a pretty inexpensive tool like that can help you. I just want to, Christine's comment, would it help to add ventilation to this drying facility? Yes. I don't know, Alejandro, if those walls can move so that you can get some ventilation. Are they sliding walls or can you like lift up the curtains? Because absolutely ventilation will help you in drying. Otherwise, you're just kind of trapping that humidity and it's going to be really counterproductive to your drying.
So great. Yeah, like this validate everything that I've been thinking on, because what I'm looking into this is also like kind of to have better control on the different variables in air humidity, the air temperature inside. Like for example, with the air humidity, there is ventilation, but what I'm trying to put in or set up in place, it's an air extractor to be able to, whenever the air humidity reaches to a certain point, then all the airflow will kind of recirculate, and at the same time to be able to kind of to pump with yeah, like with some sort of heater whenever this temperature that I'm looking for in order to have like a more control environment. Then that's the thing, like I'm trying to set up, like if within this time with these variables it's not going to ruin, or it's not like it's going to be a very high speed drying, because my time frame is giving me a week, because I cannot hold the amount of cherry for more than a week or I haven't figured out yet, at least to be able to hold yeah, the amount of cherry for more than 6 days, which is the time that I'm looking into implementing into the drying facility with this controlling these variables like
Yeah.
airflow, heat, and humidity.
But Alejandro, you don't need to dry your coffee in the same amount of time as your cherry. So you're saying you can't hold your cherry for more than 6 days. So you want to try and get your drying in 6 days so that you can have that like turnover. You don't need to do that, because what you want and what would be helpful and what we've also talked about, and Lowell has some experience, is resting your coffee, giving your coffee a break mid drying at like 15% is really positive for long-term storage, for stability, for quality. It can actually improve the coffee. So even if your coffee's not dry, if it's below 15, bag it up, get it out of there, put it in the bodega, get your new lot in there, dry that, and then later, give the other coffee. You can keep it for 2-3 weeks and then go back out to the drying when you have that turnover of your coffee. So definitely use the break. I think the break would be even better to dry it in 2 stages than to just try to get it done in 6 days. Lowell, I want to let you chime in.
No, you steal my thunder, Lucia. That's what I was going to say. And the other thing I was going to say is you can probably add protection if you're going to dry aggressively. at the beginning by giving it that rest. I think you could, make sure the coffee's below 20%. I think that 15 is perfect. But if you're drying aggressively on the front end by giving it that rest at 15, that'll let the coffee, get equilibrium, and any of the water that got trapped in there to be able to move, and then come back in 2 weeks or 3 weeks and finish drying it, or even a month. So I agree. That's going to hedge against aggressive drying if you're drying too aggressively in those first days. The other thing I would say about that X meter, you could probably make measurements in parchment when you're above 20%, but before you bag that coffee to store it, dehaul it and use the green option, because that meter is much more accurate in green than it is in parchment. So before you bag and especially like if you're using it for your final moisture where you want like 11%, dehaul the sample and do it in green, because your parchment is not going to be very accurate on that machine. But absolutely, dry down to 15% and move it and rest it, and that's going to help you if you're drying too aggressively in the beginning.
I was gonna say you could also calibrate to the co-ops meters in town, or just use them.
Oh no, Manizales.
Oh, Manizales.
We
Okay,
do
yeah,
that. However, we have the agrotronics
Yeah.
type of, which is not the best one because it has to be calibrated too often to do that. But one follow-up question and one final question. Sorry if everyone's leaving because the other subject had more debate. But should like when I should bag it up in order to have like this intermittent type of drying, should it be backed in this type of EcoTac type of bags?
Normally,
Wouldn't it kind of have late after
If
I don't
you
know
have it, I
50?
would.
yeah, if you have the EcoTac,
But
definitely
If you
use
have it, I
EcoTac.
would.
but then if during those like 15, 20 days or even a month resting period, would it regain humidity? Wouldn't it?
Well, okay, so what you're looking at
Not
is
not if it's in
not if it's an EcoTact, especially knowing Colombia and the high humidity in Colombia, you definitely don't, you want to have the EcoTact. And let's say, kind of like what we talked about before, the moisture could be trapped inside. So maybe when you put it in, it's, at 15 and then you spend 3 weeks and then it goes up to 17. That's not that it regained humidity from the outside environment. That's probably that the moisture on the inside is coming out to the surface and you're reading higher, but it's not absorbing more moisture if it's an EcoTact. If it's not an EcoTact, maybe it is absorbing moisture because Colombia is humid. But definitely, yeah, use that and don't be scared if the number goes up, because it may be good that you've gotten that, homogenation, you've gotten that more consistent environment. Micah asked, what's the ideal range for drying? So can you guys see my cat? That's Thor. It's difficult to say the ideal range because it also depends on the moisture of your coffee, right? So like you want to have lower moisture, 40-50%, so that it's hard to dry if you're at 100% moisture content because you want that differential. So I don't want to prescribe a right moisture content because it's so hard to get a consistent environment. Okay, so 75%. Is it 75% safe? It is really humid. Is it 75% like all the time, like 24 hours, or do you have periods where, because like we can get up to 80-90% here at night because it gets really humid, but during the day we can make some progress. Another comment, doesn't it get some kind of fungus? Not if we're below that 15%, you're safe.
Yeah, 75% at night and the morning is fine. So we go up to 88% every night here, but during the day, because of the sun and the dryness, it drops down to 30 to 40% humidity. So we have that range during the day to dry in.
7 days of rain. Okay, let's do real quick, Dylan, and then Alejandro's last comment because I do have to jump on another call. But again, you guys can keep chatting.
Sorry, I know that we're 5 minutes past. But what about if you're able to control during, per se, let's say during night, where those humidity levels go over 80%? That's something that I'm trying to do with some sort of dehumidifier to be able to control that humidity during night. What are your thoughts on that?
That would be very difficult unless you had a massive dehumidifier for that room. Like, it's such a big space. You would need like 30 tiny ones that you use in your house to dehumidify that. You might have better luck just closing off any of the screened portions and having the nylon and just trying to maintain, like, once you get to sunset, close the room off and try and maintain that level of humidity and don't let it creep up higher. But you're going to have a hard time controlling a large room without industrial equipment.
All right, everybody. Hi, Jack. Good to see you. Thanks. Thanks for joining the end of our Discord. You guys, I am sorry. I do have to run. I have another call to jump on, but I want to thank you for hanging out today. As always, the replay will be available a little bit later today. And if we didn't, yeah, you guys keep talking. Alejandro, you can keep putting your questions or updates and pictures on the chats, and keep getting input from other folks in the community. And I will see you guys in 2 weeks.